You are now tuning in to the Going North podcast with your host, bestselling author, professional speaker, and member of the John Maxwell team, Dominic Dom Brightman. And every Monday and Thursday, we're going to hear the voice of a different author sharing their gifts, stories, and expertise to help you charge forward in life. Now let's get on with the show. And today on the Going North podcast, we bring you some fabulous humans from across the globe where they try to survive my questions that feel like a grill and my puns that come straight out of nowhere. Today is no different. Especially since we have a returning guest in the house. This fabulous lady was a part of the Chaos to Clarity November Fabulosity Tour, and she's back for more because she has another book that published shortly after that one called The Evolutionary Empath, and she is a shamanic minister, and she's back to share more of her wonderful wares, goods, experiences, knowledge, and other Steph goodness. So let's give it up for the one and only Stephanie Red Feather. How you feeling?
I'm good. Thanks, Dom.
Yes, indeed. Welcome back.
I appreciate that. Thanks for the opportunity.
Oh, man. But yes, indeed. It's a beautiful thing when it's more than a co-author project. You got that solo project, Hall of Notes style, where you go solo, even though it's not really solo.
Right. Yeah, this is my first book, and I hope the first of many. I have at least a half a dozen other works in my head, and that I'm beginning to put into, bring into form this year. So.
Sweet. That's what I'm talking about. More books. Are they going to be even thicker than the first one?
I can't tell you that. I don't. It's funny because I have a friend who's a publisher that I was picking her brain when I started to write my book, and she gave me some guidance on self-help books. And one of the things it said was try to keep your manuscript to 50,000 words or less, because people can get through that in 2 to 3 hours. It's more bite-sized. And so that got thrown out the window because my final manuscript was close to 100,000 words.
Oh,
And the
yeah.
publisher was okay with that. So.
Well, considering the topic and how deep you went into it, I mean, it's kind of no surprises. Like, yeah, we got to keep this in here.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. And besides, it's really not that bad. It's 290 pages. Ain't nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, indeed. One past guest, you had 600 pages of content, and we're like, oh. One of our friends like,
Wow.
hey, stop it. Just stop it. Put the book out. Stop it.
Break it into parts or something.
Yeah, because she was going to put even more in there. Like, no. You make that a series. But she is fabulous, though, like yourself. So the fabulous name of the book is The Evolutionary Empath. So is this the book, like the fitness book for empaths to help them get 8-pack abs, metaphorically speaking?
I like that. Yes, in a way it is. It is, the term empath has been around in spiritual circles and new age circles, consciousness circles for a number of decades, and people generally understand what the concept means. But it felt important to me to, when I sat down to write the book, my spirit guides gave me only one directive, and that was to create a definition, because I had not seen anybody really get granular on explaining what it means to be an empath. And so, in the book, I go into great detail about what an empath is. I give the bigger picture perspective of why we're here, that we're not an anomaly, that we're not an accident, that we actually have a very divine cosmic purpose. And then the book is broken into two parts. The second part is more the rubber meets the road, practical application, as you say, the 6-pack abs part, where it's, what are the practices, that one needs to engage in, and skills and competencies to acquire to be able to function as a sensitive being on this planet.
Oh, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Especially with the empathic Big Bang. I'm like, oh, shoot. Forget about the Big Bang from millions of years ago that the evolutionists like to talk about. This is the empathic Big Bang, something totally different.
It is. I coined that phrase because in my research and in my just, connecting in with the bigger picture and my intuition, empaths have not been around on the planet for very long. Even 100 years ago, the level of collective consciousness on the planet wasn't high enough to really sustain people with our set of sensitivities. And so all of us who are on the planet right now, who've been incarnating for the last 100 years, maybe 150, I've collectively termed all of us the empathic Big Bang. And there's a quote from the movie Moneyball that says, "The first guy through the wall always gets bloody." And I believe that, collectively, all of us who are here right now are the first ones through the wall getting bloody, because most of us did not have parents, teachers, spiritual leaders who recognized our sensitivities, who understood what we were dealing with, who knew how to guide us. And so we're the ones, hacking our way through the jungle, cutting the path for the ones coming behind us.
Oh, yeah. It's funny how you mentioned the first one through the wall is bloody, because funny enough, I underlined a part in the book where he mentioned how, oh my goodness, it's actual bleeding gums during your time in the Air Force from all the energy that was around you and absorbing all of that.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up, because I just had an interview the other day, and the person who was interviewing me was also in the Air Force, so we were sharing stories. And I was 25 at the time. I was in Saudi Arabia for 3 months. I had no idea I was an empath. This was long before my spiritual awakening. And having no idea that I was taking on everybody else's emotions, because there's obviously heightened emotions, intense emotions, because you're away from home. Your life is more, I don't know if I should say threatened, but the situation is more intense, it's more real. There can be some life and death circumstances, there's more risk. And so I was just absorbing the tensions of our countries, the tensions of the work that we were doing, the tensions of individual people. And so while I loved the work I was doing, I would go home at night and cry so hard that my throat would swell up and I couldn't breathe. My gums started bleeding. I had other bizarre symptoms that I recognize now were just my body showing the signs of complete stress, overload, and overwhelm.
Oh, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And I can only imagine what some folks are going through at the moment with all the nonsense going on if they are not aware of what makes them sensitive or how to really focus on that at the moment. Because I'm pretty sure a lot of folks are going stark raving mad, because noted in your book that also that empaths react to nature too, which is very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and let me just share that yesterday I posted a free 14-minute video. I have a YouTube channel. You can find me on I have a business Facebook page as well as a personal Facebook page, where I talk about how to purge your nervous system and clear your energy field of excess emotions so they don't build up. So I just invite anybody who's listening to this, if that speaks to you, you've got that free video that you can go to. And of course, I have a lot of other projects and that sort of thing. But yeah, there are many tools that we can use to help release the overload and overwhelm and find balance again. And I find nature to be an incredibly vital way to do that, whether it's going for a walk. I do a lot of just laying on the earth or hugging a tree. There's a practice that's called earthing. And what it's really about is, we are electromagnetic beings. The earth is an electromagnetic being. There is a vital exchange of electromagnetism that happens when we are physically touching the earth. And I'm talking about being barefooted or laying our bodies on the earth, because with shoes, we wear shoes so much of the time, and rubber and other materials insulate us from that vital electromagnetic exchange of energies. And so, there's so many benefits to being in nature, that I could talk about it for the whole show. But that is one major tool that I invite people to connect with, is to get out in nature, to sit near a lake, whatever your favorite thing is. Even if you live in the city, just sit in the grass or find a tree and lean up against it if it feels too conspicuous to throw your arms around it.
Oh, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And you are so right about that, because I can tell the difference instantly, especially during the warmer months, since there is a winter here. Well, then again, and again, in Maryland, the seasons decide whatever the heck they want to be on the day of. But yeah, when you go outside and just go outside and then you go barefoot, especially in the grass. If for some random day, it's like, all right, it's so warm, I'm just going to go out, grab the groceries out the car or whatever, or just go outside and just stare at the clouds for a quick moment. It's
Mhm.
really sometimes an energy boost and as well with the whole earthing thing, because I guess what happens on earth stays on earth, right?
Usually.
Yeah.
Well,
Yes, it-
I'm wondering, before we get too far into this, we kind of got excited, and I imagine that there's some people listening going, okay, what is an empath? Share some of the definitions. So would it be all right if I shared part of the definition with your listeners?
Never. I'm just messing with you. Go on ahead.
Well, I talked about how, I spend 2 chapters in the book, so I can't, we don't have time to go into every single thing that I talk about. But I explain it from a variety of different perspectives, and I actually created a formal definition that's a whole paragraph long, because I just couldn't make it any shorter. But one of the things I like to share that I think is the meatiest and that most people can really connect with is what I call the 5 distinct qualities of an empath. And so that's what I'm going to share. So the first quality is our ability to merge with and absorb the energy of other beings. And that's anything, that has consciousness. So people, animals, anything with life force. And that stems from a very open personal energy field. And so this is the quality that can cause us to unconsciously take on other people's emotions and problems, and also cause us to struggle with boundaries. The second quality is that we have a highly sensitive nervous system. And so, that may be a little bit of, kind of Department of Redundancy department, like, okay, nervous systems are supposed to be sensitive. But for empaths, it's like it got turned up to 200% instead of 100%. And it really makes us prone to overwhelm and overstimulation. So self-care for empaths is vital. The third quality is that we have a great sensitivity to the energies around us and an ability to perceive or access subtle information stored in the energy fields of all types of life forms. And so, I'm a shamanic practitioner, so I'm used to kind of tuning into the subtle realms. There's many different levels of consciousness and many different dimensions of existence. And so for empaths, it is easier for us to tune into these kind of non-physical, if you will, more subtle realms. So people that see the angels or the dead, or have paranormal experiences, or just have wicked intuition, people who are mediums and psychics, the animal communicators, all of these sorts of things fall under this category. The fourth quality is the premium that we place on peace and harmony, and that is in relationships, our environment, and our own energy field. And so when we are unconscious that we're an empath, we tend to live from the unhealthy aspects. And so when we don't know we're an empath, this quality can cause us to be doormats and have very codependent relationships and not stand up for ourselves, because we will do anything and everything to keep our relationships and our environment as stress-free and calm and harmonious as possible. And the fifth quality is our big open hearts and a desire to serve others. And so this tends to make us inclined towards careers focused on service. You know, a lot of people in my tribe are massage therapists, energy healers, therapists, healthcare workers, you know, that sort of thing. But, you know, I was in the Air Force for 10 years. So clearly there are empaths who are computer programmers and engineers and bankers and lawyers and, you know, kind of more traditional careers as well. And this desire to serve others, if we're not careful, again, if we're unconscious that we are made up this way, we can overgive and put ourselves last on the list, which causes us to live from a very depleted state. And so with those five qualities, I do want to kind of qualify it in that I don't have a hard and fast line that I draw that says, you know, if you peg on this side, you know, then you're an empath, but if you're on this other side, you're not an empath. I leave it up to you to decide, you know, if these qualities resonate with you. Maybe 3 out of the 5 resonate and the other 2 don't. That doesn't mean you're not an empath. So it's all of these fall on a spectrum or a continuum.
Oh, yeah, the empathic rainbow right there. That's what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And it's so true. A lot of empaths go into the service fields, and love that you mentioned how actually guys too actually can be empaths too, which
Oh,
is
of course.
so awesome. Yes, indeed. So nobody's exempt.
Yeah, right. Well, and one of the things that I propose in my book and that I believe sets me apart from a lot of other people who write and speak about this subject is I believe that in the grand cosmic scale of things, that empaths are here on purpose, that, you know, humanity is in a cycle of ascension. We are raising in vibration. We are reclaiming lost knowledge. We have light codes that are being turned on, if you will. And empaths are here because it's time for us again. And I believe that we're here to help humanity ascend to the next level of consciousness. And so, you know, we're not a random occurrence. We're not an accident. We're not an anomaly. And we're not making it up.
That's right. You heard it from the way shower herself. That's right. We are not making this up. The only thing making up is makeup itself. That's right.
Hmm.
Yep. All right, that joke goes off the list. But yes, indeed, definitely right about that. And it's interesting you mentioned light codes. Mind going deeper into light codes?
Well, this is one of those things that for me, it's an intuitive understanding as opposed to something I can scientifically prove. There might be other people who that's their line of work, is to get more into the research and testing and science. But we, you know, scientists have known for a long time that we, in our DNA code, they had identified strands that seem to have, quote, no purpose. You know, they called it junk DNA. But, you know, we're learning that there's more encoded in our DNA than we can even imagine. You know, our physical bodies are going through a transformation. It's almost like dying while we're alive. And for a couple of decades now, there's been this concept of what's called Ascension Symptoms, which means as we're ascending in consciousness, as our vibration is raising, like I was talking about, there are actual physical symptoms that we can experience. You know, anything from feeling like we're sick or being exhausted or having digestive issues to headaches to dizziness to any number of dozens of things that are attributed to these parts of us that have been dormant, if you will, this coding, these, you know, multi-layered dimensions of existence are getting turned on. We are waking up to our multidimensionality, that we are more than just humans, that we are spiritual beings having a human experience, and that we can live on and travel through and access multiple dimensions. So there's so many things that we're waking up to and turning on to, that we can't even describe or prove. It's like the ancients who discovered the chakra system, or traditional Chinese medicine. They were able to see, if you will, the existence of these energy systems long before there were scientific tools to prove that they existed. And so I think that's the point that we're at with a lot of these things, is we have people who are connecting into higher intelligences, that are channeling things, that are having inspiration, that are making discoveries. And and now the next step is, okay, how do we prove it? How do we test it? How do we, all of this kind of stuff. So, my science geeky self can kind of get all excited about some of these things, but this book is mostly written from the perspective of being a mystic, a spiritual person, a shamanic practitioner, from as opposed to strictly from science.
Oh, yes, indeed. A science geek who loves to be called Reverend Doctor. That's what I'm talking about.
I
Yes,
do have a
indeed.
maths degree. I know if you look at my biography, it is a little bit of a what? Because I have, it's like, you have a math degree and you're in the Air Force, and my master's and doctorate in shamanic studies, and, I'm a reverend. So yeah, there's a couple of 180s that happened in my life.
Well, that's a nice way of putting it, a couple 180s.
Yeah,
Because it's
to
freaking
put it
true.
mildly. Yeah.
But yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. That is very interesting. So there's this thing going around in certain circles known as the fifth dimension. Is there a particular dimension that you occasionally travel to, or is that something not in your wheelhouse just yet?
Well, I am aware, like, for example, Barbara Hanclau wrote a book called The Alchemy of the Nine Dimensions, and I'm a little bit familiar with that. So I understand the 5D, or, five-dimensional consciousness, not to be confused with 5G, the 5G.
Ta!
Yeah. But when I talk about different dimensions, I'm more speaking of it just from the shamanic sense of, a lot of indigenous tribes have teachings that there are three worlds, if you will. So there's the world we live in, the everyday earthbound 3D, and then there's the inner world, sometimes misconstrued as the underworld, but the inner self, the inner dimensions, the place where maybe our shadow resides, elements of the unconscious or subconscious. Then there's the upper worlds, if you will, which is the realms of where the ancestors reside, and the realm of spirit guides and that sort of thing. So it's being able to access and walk through and be in these different states. There's, for a long time, for many hundreds and thousands of years in history, the medicine men and women, the shamans, whatever name that you want to give them, of these different indigenous tribes, used altered states of consciousness, sometimes naturally induced. So it can be done through music, drumming, chanting, etc. It can also be done through the conscious use of plant medicine. And they would access these different dimensions of consciousness to be of service to their tribes and communities, to be able to see into the future, or to gain information of some sort that would be beneficial to the community as a whole, or to individuals that might be coming to them for specific healing. So there's a lot that can be talked about when we talk about different dimensions of consciousness.
Oh, yeah, that is definitely so right. That's like a whole another podcast. Well, funny enough, that could be a whole one podcast, but that's definitely a time suck right there, because there's so much in that realm, and it's It's piqued my curiosity a bit, and I'm like, okay, sounds interesting. Sounds interesting. But this is all about the magical stuff in the 8-pack ab empath revolution. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So, since this ain't your first rodeo, is there a question that you wish more interviewers would ask you as a guest when you're on these podcasts and interviews and such?
Oh, wow. Not really. I mean, we pretty much cover the parts that I think are important, especially when introducing this concept to people. You know, the what the definition is, what my experience of the bigger context is. Something we haven't talked about yet that I imagine you were probably going to get to is some of the tools for people to use, because you know the bigger picture is nice, the understanding, the definition, so people can locate themselves inside of this and go, ah, yes, I resonate with this. But you know, in any workshop that I create and lead or book, or you know, any major piece of work, I feel like one of the gifts I bring to the world is context, but I'm always going to bring it down to the human 3D level and make it practical and applicable. And so I think, you know, talking about some of these skills and tools might be a good place to go next.
There you go. Arm and Hammer style. That's what I'm talking about. Oh, man. Sweet. So, for those who are empaths and highly sensitive people, it's probably been one of the most helpful tools for you so far.
Yeah. It's actually two. It's really hard to not talk about one without talking about the other. And those two things are managing your energy field and drawing boundaries. And so I talk about them separately in the book because you have to, you know, you have to pick something to do first, second, and third. You can't do it all at once. But, you know, in terms of energy, if you don't recognize or understand yourself as an energetic being, that is where I would invite you to start, is to recognize that you are more than just the physical flesh. You have an energy field. And so getting familiar with it is an important first step. And so some people imagine it as a bubble or a sphere or a cocoon, or, you know, I have a client that used to think of it as her hamster ball, where she'd roll around in her hamster ball. But we have an edge, and I spoke of in the definition that as empaths, we show up on the planet with a very open energy field. And what that means is it's more easy, natural, quote, if you will, for us to blend and merge with other people, to abdicate our own throne and drop our anchor in another human being and feel all their feelings and live from their point of view. And we don't even know we're doing it because we've done it our whole lives and we have no other frame of reference. And so when we can start to tune into our energy field and the edges of our container, then that's going to provide a lot of information to us, because we can tune into it and go, okay, what does it look like? How does it feel? Wow, it looks like Swiss cheese. That's probably not good. You know, what do I need to do to fortify my field? How do I identify energy leaks, either leaking outwardly or inwardly, which I also talk about in the book. And so once you can begin to relate to yourself as an energetic being and recognize that you have an edge, then that sets the stage for being able to manage your energy field. So it's just, you know, you can simply think of it like having a fence around your yard. That's your energy boundary. Now you have to maintain the, you know, you got to mow the grass and you got to weed the flower beds and, you know, trim the low hanging tree branches and all of that sort of thing. Or if you want to think about it in terms of your house, you got to dust and vacuum and do the dishes. So our energy fields are going to accumulate just dust, if you will, you know, because dust is just an accumulation of dead skin cells and carpet fibers and pet dander and hair. And, you know, so for the most part, it's not necessarily bad, but if it builds up, it can clog our energy field. It can, you know, kind of gum up the system. Add on top of that other people's emotions and feelings and problems and everything else that we're perceiving from all of the people around us, and our energy field can collapse in on us from the weight of all of these other things. And so we need to establish good energy hygiene. And that means practices for clearing your energy field. And so I have a long list of different tools in the book, but a couple of things I use frequently. One of them is smudging, which is just burning either sage or sweetgrass or Palo Santo, whatever your favorite thing is. And I use a smudge fan, but you can also just, burn the stuff in a bowl and kind of waft it around your energy field with the intention of releasing everything that doesn't serve you. Another tool that I use quite frequently is deep conscious breaths, where you're breathing good, if you will, healthy, nutritive energy up into your body, and imagining yourself like a tree where your roots are down into Mother Earth, and your in-breath is pulling up vital nutrients and minerals and water up into your body, and you're exhaling the dross, you're exhaling the things that aren't yours, the things that don't serve you, the stuff you've accidentally picked up, down out your root system back into Mother Earth, where she can transmute that for you. And so those are a couple of practices for clearing your field. And that's something that needs to be done daily, if not multiple times a day, because we are dynamic beings. Our energy field, our boundary is not static. It's not just something you set like the, knob on a stereo and then walk away. It's something we have to tend to, because it's a living field. We are a living being. Our energy field is a living field. Then we get to boundaries. And boundaries there's a couple different ways to think of it. There's the boundary, which is the edge of your energy field. That defines you. It separates you from other people, and it's okay to be distinct from other people. One of the things I know is kind of confounding, especially for people who have faint memories of what it's like to be in spirit form. When we're in spirit form, the way we interact with one another is very different. And we recognize that we all come from the same source, that we're all God stuff or stardust or however you think of it. But when we come into a body, we are our own unique individuation of creator. And one of the chapter titles in my book is You and I Are One, but we are not the same. And that is okay, because we have different viewpoints, different beliefs, different personal vibrations. We don't have to be the same. And as empaths, it can be difficult for us to figure out where we end and the next person begins. And so that's why that distinguishing of your own personal boundary or edge is so important. Then we move into another application of boundaries, which is drawing boundaries in relationship, saying no, asking for what you need, speaking your truth. And those skills can be difficult, especially if we tend to be people pleasers, when we're so naturally inclined to blend and merge with others, we tend to be codependent in our relationships. We lose ourselves and we don't have a strong sense of self. So I know I could go on and on, so I'm just going to pause and see if you have any questions.
Hey, it's fabulous right there. Lots of great content, especially with energy hygiene, which is so important. And I like how that term's actually been showing up in my life a lot more often, because it's so darn true. Because, of course, there's the physical hygiene. That's a given. You have to do that. The coronavirus is proof of that, my gosh. But the actual energy hygiene piece, it's a lot deeper and I wouldn't say a lot different, because, in a way, it keeps your physical body energized in a way. So it's really great that you're mentioning that, along with the boundaries themselves, which is also something that I've noticed a lot of people are starting to at least try to practice more often, at least put into their lives. So it's great that you mentioned all those fabulous things indeed. As I'm telling you, that empath goodness, the empath ab goodness. Heck, that might even be the title of the episode now. Let me stop. That might not. Well, mean, hey, I've done Chocolate Brothers for Christ and Wisdom from the Warrior Princess with pumpkin spice, so you never know.
That's great. Would definitely be attention getting.
Oh man. Well, that's fabulous indeed, right there. And I also hear that this is going to be on audio soon as well, which is
It,
even greater.
it actually is. I know when we chatted last, it was coming out. It came out at the end of February. So wherever books are sold, whatever your favorite online retailer is, you will find copies of the book if you like to do it that way, and audiobook and Kindle and all of those different ways. So and I also just want to share too that in addition to the book itself, the almost 100,000 words of a book, I created 8 guided meditations. And let me tell you, I'm probably not going to do that again because it was a lot of work. But I wanted to include some just extra practices, and they are absolutely free. When you get the book, there is a website in the book that is hosted by the publisher where all of these meditations are accessible. And these are not float through the clouds kind of meditations. These are good, beefy, meaty, valuable meditations that guide you through, for example, practices to get more into your body, to identify where you've got stuck emotions, to connect with the masculine principle, to connect with the feminine principle. So lots of good stuff in there. So it's almost like a second book's worth of information, because these guided meditations are, can be a good 20 to 30 minutes long, because they go in depth and provide information for you, and opportunities to have experiential experiences, if you will, where you get the experience inside your own body.
So were you reliving some past moments during the guided meditations?
Depending on where it's taking you, depending on the focus of the meditation itself, it really depends. And I don't have them memorized, so let me just flip. So flipping in the book, so one of them is where am I? Let me just flip. Let me do a backflip real quick, Tom. Okay. So one of these meditations is where are my edges? So it's an actual visualization of learning to tune into that boundary I was talking about, your bubble or your container, moving the edges closer, further away, getting an experience of how that feels, so that can become a tool that you can take into the world to use as needed. There's a meditation to identify and release stored emotions, because we store those emotions in our body. And sometimes we don't, most of the time, we are not fully embodied. So there's a whole chapter in the book about embodiment. And, a lot of times we aren't embodied because we don't want to have to deal with the traumas, the unhealed wounds, the unresolved issues that we have stored in our body. And there's a meditation to stay in your center. So like I talked about, as empaths, it's easy for us to abdicate our own throne. And so one of our important journeys that we need to take is reclaiming our sense of self, coming back home to ourselves, being grounded in our own sovereign center. So there's a lot of great guided meditations that accompany the book.
That's right. That empath GPS right there. Yes, indeed. Them guided meditations. That's right. It will guide you to spend $2,997 on Stephanie Red Feather's super awesome secret program. Yes. Yes, indeed. It's guiding
I didn't
you.
know I created that.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. The Blue Star North Temple program. Yes, indeed. It will take you to the temple. Yes, indeed. Even higher than that. Let me stop messing with you. Woo. Well, since it's round two, you get the extra super secret question for returning guests, and that is if you were to give the final keynote address of your life and everybody in the world had to listen to it for 90 minutes and they couldn't even use their smartphones unless you told them to during the presentation, they had to focus on you. What would the message be and what would it entail?
Mm. Hmm. What comes to me is do the work of finding and expressing your true authentic self. My belief, especially in my research and personal experience with the concept of embodiment, an epiphany that it led me to is that there are so many spiritual practices or religious paradigms that focus on the upward movement of energy, like transcendence, leaving the body, being one with spirit. And I'm not saying those are bad, but what I am saying is there needs to be a balance. And that balance is being in the body. Because if this focus is only on, like emotions are lower sensations, we want to transcend the emotions, that, we are evolving if we can transcend the body completely. And to me, it's like, what's the point of coming into a body in the first place if all we wanted to do was remember our oneness with spirit? We could have just stayed in spirit form. So there's a reason we chose to come into a body, to experience this earth school, to experience a physical incarnation. And so I'm not saying practices of the body or groundedness or embodiment are more important than spiritual practices, but there's been such an emphasis, and I think an overemphasis, so for so many centuries, on that upward movement of energy, that we need to balance it with the downward movement of energy. We are spiritual beings having a human experience, and we are alchemical conduits of manifestation. Nothing gets created without us. We need a physical body to receive the inspiration, to get the vision, to talk about our vision and enroll other people that we need to support the vision, and to have the will to bring it into form and the ability to see it through. So things don't happen without us being in a body in this way. And so tuning into and expressing our authentic self, our as I spoke of earlier, our unique individuation of the Creator, I believe, is why we're here on this planet. And so that is my answer in this moment.
Oh, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. That's right. Authenticity right there. That's right. Authenticity guaranteed. Yes, indeed. That's right. No pleather jackets here. Get the genuine article. Let me stop.
And I just have to say, Dom, I love that those things are so easy for you, because for me, coming up with those kind of cool turns of phrase or analogies are so hard for me. My brain just doesn't work that way. So I appreciate that creative genius in you.
Oh, yeah. A lot of reading and a lot of practice on customers day by day. Yes, indeed. Heck, even sometimes podcast guests themselves, too. Yep. It's going to be one huge stand-up routine eventually at this point.
Right.
Oh, man. But yes, indeed, enjoyed you, enjoyed you, enjoyed you. Yes, indeed, with extra joy.
Mm.
Yes, indeed. Heck, that's a new one right there. Yes, indeed, enjoyed you with extra joy. Yes, indeed. Yep. It's like sprinkles on the cupcake with a cherry on top.
Mm-hmm.
That's how much joy it is. Yes, indeed. So for the folks who want to keep in magical contact with the good Reverend Dr. Steph, what's the best way for folks to reach out to you?
Yes, I invite you to my website. It is bluestartemple.org. I do work with clients on a limited basis. I have only so much room in my schedule, so I take so many clients at a time as space is made available if you want to do one-on-one work with me. I also have video home study program and downloadable workbooks and guided meditations, not the same ones that are in the book I was talking about, but different ones. And I have in development in my head probably a whole nother dozen video home study programs and workbooks that I need 3 of me to keep up with. But you know, my goal, my desire is to create as many tools as possible to support sensitive souls on their spiritual journey. So on my website, you will find all of these different products if you want to stay in touch with me and upcoming events. I also, do articles and have a wide variety of things that I offer to my tribe. So subscribing to my newsletter might be a good choice for you to stay in touch with all of those things.
Woohoo!
And buy the book. Buy the book and tell your friends.
That's right. Tell your friends, tell your cat, get that evolutionary empath. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. If you have that sensitive person in your life, they will enjoy the book. If they love to use the head and the shoulders, they'll definitely love the book. Indeed. Yes, indeed. Because it's nice and thick. It's not Bible thick, though. Don't worry. It's not that thick. But it's a nice, good size for your knowledge, for your chrome. Yes, indeed. So that way you can really shine like some chrome. Yes, indeed. So any parting words for the folks still listening, Reverend Steph?
Yeah, I know that my tendency is to be very serious. And so I know that I've had some people respond to my message like, well, that feels really heavy that I have this cosmic mission to help humanity evolve to the next level of consciousness. That feels like a lot of pressure. So I just want to say, you don't have to do anything different. It doesn't mean that all of a sudden you have to run for office or create some kind of nonprofit organization or become some sort of socio-political activist or, just keep being you where you are. Your consciousness around the matter is what is most important.
How's it going, you super special, awesome human? Since you made it to the end of this episode, it looks like you really enjoyed yourself. Since you enjoyed this episode, be sure to share it with at least 3 people in your network and tell them what you really liked about this episode. Heck, even shoot myself or the guest an email and let them know what you liked most about this interview so that way they can stay inspired to keep pushing out great work.